Right now, we're going to Drew DeArmond. He does radio up in Huntsville, 97.7 The Zone. Let's talk some college football. Drew, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
I'm always glad to be back on with you, Ryan. It's great to be on in the city of Tuscaloosa. I heard you and Marquis' conversation. It's taken some adjustment for me to do War Eagle Wednesdays every Wednesday here in the Rocket City of Huntsville, but different market and have to do what's necessary, but always try to talk a lot of Crimson Tide as well.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, but you devote one day, and like I said, man, if my boss walked upstairs, he might be hosting his first radio show, at least on Wednesday.
Well,
at least co-hosting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we had some great conversation today on the show. I know Mike Detillier is a good friend of yours, and we reconnected with him today and wanted to speak with him because there's nobody that knows Louisiana better than Mike. And we wanted to reminisce about the great SEC legend, Billy Cannon, and who we lost this past weekend. He passed away at 80 years old. And though he's, been away from the gridiron a long, long time, Ryan, if you think of LSU football, Alabama and LSU have had a great rivalry since Nick Saban came back to Red Stick and now is in Tuscaloosa. But the first name that always comes to mind when you think of LSU is Billy Cannon.
No doubt, and we'll look at LSU maybe a little bit later. But let's go back to Alabama here just for a couple of minutes. Tua Tagovailoa returns home to Hawaii there to be celebrated as a hometown hero. Your big takeaway from maybe some of the things that you heard coming out of Eva Beach?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, first of all, the testimony that Tua gave was outstanding, and thanking everyone for having a celebration in his honor, and always being, of course, the first to thank his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I mean, it's always great to see a young man with his priorities in order. And then, of course, the big topic was, what he told a group of middle school students about, perseverance and that he nearly quit Alabama and that he thought about transferring if he hadn't played in the college football playoff. I think, most of the conversation he was having with those young people was about when he first got to Alabama, and it happens a lot. I mean, he of course wasn't playing, and then he had to go through the fourth quarter program before that, and that really tests your mental and physical toughness. I think it really tested Tua, but he stuck it out. And then I think he was a little frustrated because he wasn't playing, and that happens. I mean, it happened to Derrick Henry. It happened to Trent Richardson. It's happened to a lot of young players that have come through the Alabama and Nick Saban's program. But, if you stick it out, a lot of times it's worth it. We've seen with Anthony Averett and what he did being a 5-year player. Most of these elite talents like Tua are not going to be 5-year players, and we understand that. But Najee Harris, his roommate, I know he was frustrated as well, but they stuck it out, and they seized their opportunity against Georgia, and they helped Alabama win their 17th national championship in the most dramatic fashion ever, in my opinion, in the history of Alabama football. So I will say this. I do think that a lot of people were finally woken up to the fact that Tua Tagovailoa could have transferred, and it would have changed everything for Alabama football.
Well, I go back to think about the game is so close. It is so close. It's a game of inches. And I know I said it as we opened up the segment. I know we talked about it late last week. But when we talk about Calvin Ridley stumbling at about the 3 or 4 yard line, if that stumble doesn't happen, then Tua Tagovailoa may be sitting in Southern California. We may be sitting here going into year number 3, questioning why and why not, and looking at the quarterback situation here in Tuscaloosa.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that. I mean, there's a lot of things. If Alabama's down 13-7 at halftime, does Nick Saban pull the trigger? I mean, all that's, a valid argument. I mean, so I guess you could say the stars kind of aligned in that situation, and hopefully it changed everything forever for Kirby Freeze. I mean, smart, because if Kirby Smart wins that game, then he's, Nick Saban's kryptonite. He's the greatest young coach ever in college football and yada, yada. But instead, they're still back to looking at Herschel Walker and praying that they're going to be back and thinking that they're Alabama when they're really not. But, I mean, it's really kind of funny how history can be almost can be rewritten a little bit. And I think, to be honest with you, and what I mean by that comment is, I think with Nick Saban showing the fortitude to make the change and put Tua Tagovailoa behind center, I think he has started to rewrite the end of his career at Alabama, and it may just be more of what we've seen before. I think it could very well cement, his tenure if he coaches 5, 6, 7 more years as the greatest we've ever seen in college football history.
Let me take you to Las Vegas here for just a couple of minutes. Alabama is now up from a 29.5-point favorite to a 31.5-point favorite out in the experts in the desert. A big line between Alabama and Louisville to open up the season in 103 days, brought to you by Alabama Credit Union.
Yeah, it's a huge line. I mean, probably the biggest we've ever seen. And I think Bobby Petrino is a good football coach, but part of that reasoning, I think if everybody remembers when he was at Arkansas, Ryan, he didn't have a lot of success against Nick Saban. He finally did win a Sugar Bowl. He won a BCS bowl game. He won 10 games, but he could never beat Alabama. They had a lot of showdowns, unbeaten ones in September against the Crimson Tide, where they were both highly ranked, and they all ended up being mismatches on paper. Alabama dominated Bobby Petrino. They've always kind of dominated his style of football. He believes in throwing it all over the lot. They're not really a physical team, in my opinion. They don't do a great job running the football against quality opponents. And then when you lose Lamar Jackson, a Heisman Trophy winner and arguably the greatest football player in Louisville history, and you've got Juwan Pass, a young quarterback, going against Alabama in what could be his first start and should be his first start, that's a tall task for a Louisville team against Alabama. Do I think Alabama's going to cover the 30? That'll be tough. I mean, it'll be, in my opinion, Tua's first start. It'll be interesting to see if Alabama can come out guns blazing. If they can get some turnovers, I think they're going to have a chance to cover that number. But right now, I would say Alabama would be around, in my opinion, if I set the line, about a 24-point favorite, but still significantly better than I think this Louisville team coming up in Orlando.
Let me take you to SI.com. Andy Staples has penned an article there, and it said the latest evidence that Nick Saban lives in his competitors' heads. And he goes through the different changes. That instead of beating Nick Saban on the football field, they're looking for ways to adjust to him. They're looking for ways to, how do they find a rule that they can prevent this Nick Saban train from just rolling over these guys? It's kind of fun to reflect on the changes that Nick Saban has had affecting, or the influence that he's had affecting the rule changes in big-time college football.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a trendsetter. And, but for every move they make, the beautiful thing about Nick Saban is he has a counter move. Just like when they stopped the in-person evaluating around this time of year, he started the video conferencing, which, was a huge factor in Tony Brown's commitment to Alabama and playing at the university, and really kind of set the trend for a lot of schools doing that now. He did the Skype, the type of video conferencing with the parents and with the players. He made that was a huge move on his part. I mean, now, if they've changed this recruiting calendar, what does Nick Saban do? He starts doing the Bama cuts. They build a barbershop into their facility for the players to come back to, for a lot of former players. You've been talking about the former players back on campus at Alabama this past weekend and today with the golf tournament. I mean, he creates a lot of camaraderie, a lot of family, and it totally goes against what everybody uses against him in recruiting, which is he doesn't care. He's all about business. All he cares about is the next 5-star. He doesn't do a great job having relationships with his players. All that's out the window. And, basically all they have left to try to talk about is, well, if you go to Alabama, you'll never play. Well, that's all. Just go look at the newest Daniel Moore painting, Ryan. How many freshmen are on that painting? So a lot of the things that are used against Nick Saban in recruiting, and a lot of things the NCAA tries to do to limit him, he's already ahead of them. He's like one of these guys, like an old moonshine runner. He's already ahead of the police and everybody else trying to chase him, because he's smarter than all those guys and more cunning. So I just think Nick Saban's that's why he'll go down as the greatest of all time. I mean, Bear Bryant, a legend and an icon. There'll never be another one. But Nick Saban in this modern era of college football, what he's done is just unprecedented.
Well, I think when you reflect on it, it's the little things. The Nick Saban rule that we refer to as not visiting campuses, but it's like now, did you see where coaches are now trying to create a rule in the NCAA that will prevent the number of headsets that you can use on game day? And as Andy Staples points out, it doesn't even – most coaches don't even know the total headsets that are being used. They're just trying to find something to slow down Nick Saban. It's not that they really care about this rule. It's just they're trying to find something that they can prevent Nick Saban from whipping them.
And the thing is, Alabama has a lot of resources, but do they have more money than the University of Texas? Probably not.
Well, no, actually, it's second place in the SEC. According to the latest revenue, Tennessee generated more money than Alabama did in 2017-2018 season.
And they have been totally inept because they can't get everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. There are plenty of schools in the SEC and throughout college football that have got the resources that could give them a chance to compete and win national championships. But the problem is none of them hired Nick Saban, and none of them will do what it takes to get everybody, to get the right athletic director in, to get the right infrastructure in place to do it. You look at what Billy Napier is trying to do, that great article that Rainier Saban wrote. I had him on my show last week that he wrote about Billy Napier and what Billy Napier is trying to do on a smaller scale at Louisiana Lafayette. He doesn't have the budget that Nick Saban has, but before he took that job, he wanted to get assurances that he would be able to bring in a lot of support staff personnel. He's following the same model, but just trying to do it on a small, trying to dominate and be a kind of a Boise State type program. So, it cracks me up when they try to get all these rules passed. It's not going to matter, guys. The bottom line is Nick Saban is better than you. And the only way you're going to get any relief is when he retires, which isn't going to be anytime soon. So all you guys just better, buckle up your chin straps and get ready and work, because the only way you're going to beat Nick Saban is to outwork him. And unfortunately for the rest of college football, you can count on maybe one hand the number of coaches that are willing to do that. They're not willing to outwork Nick Saban.
But Drew, I think it may not be what Nick Saban has done. It may be trying to prevent something, because you got to do something. If you're making $5, $6, $7 million a year, you've got to do something. It may be about the future, because what they're seeing in Tuscaloosa is Alabama has elite quarterback play, or will have elite quarterback play. They're trying to do anything they can do to put up a roadblock in front of Nick Saban and say, okay, we're going to have to limit the headsets. We're going to have to limit the staff numbers. We're going to have to limit how much you can spend on recruiting. This, that. I mean, it's trying to do something, because you've got to at least look at your, because right now we're going to be having all these booster clubs and these caravans and the ambush tour from across the state. You've got to be able to look at your alumni and your fan base and your boosters and saying, we're doing something. We're doing something. Because you've got to get the donations to continue to come in order for you to sort of stay in the same realm with Nick Saban.
Yeah, I agree with that. But here's the problem. When you get all these, the headset rules changed, and you get all these, all this stuff that you want to, try to do to limit Nick Saban, you're also limiting yourself. I mean, you're also limiting your own program. I would think that they would understand that Nick Saban is what's good for college football. He gets more exposure to the sport. I know they get tired of him winning, but he gets more money put into the sport. Look, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I talked about what Billy Napier was trying to do. Look, South Carolina is building a huge new football facility, Ryan. And do you think there's going to be a barbershop in said facility?
I don't know. Is there?
Yes, of course. I mean, so the only way to beat Nick Saban is to try to beat him in his own game. Again, he is getting up there in age, and they're going to use that against him. But if you're a coach, I would want more resources. I wouldn't want to try to limit anything. To me, if you're trying to do that, you're you're talking about your own ability as a coach. I would want as many headsets as I could get, as big a recruiting budget as I could get, everything in order to try to compete with Nick Saban. I mean, that's what I would want to try to step up to the plate and think I could beat him. And obviously Kirby Smart thinks he can, and we'll see. He may be the new standard. He certainly had a hell of a year last year, but he's lost a lot of players. He certainly didn't want to talk about football last week in Birmingham. I wish somebody had the cojones to ask him, well, Coach, if you'd have won the game, would you be talking about it instead of choking on applesauce? But, hey, that's another story for another day. But, I mean,
he didn't want to talk football, Drew.
If you're a college coach, you should want more money spent on the sport.
He did not want to talk about football. Come on. I mean, he's a football coach. He didn't want to talk about football. Give him a break. Give him a break, Drew. He just did not want to talk about football.
Guess not.
I mean, think about it, man. If you're former
I guess
boss,
I wouldn't either if I was on a Daniel Moore painting getting whipped.
Well, but that's the old thing. I mean, he thought he had Papa Bear beat, and Nick Saban jerked him and said, "Come here, not so fast, young man. Pow, pow, pow. Go on back to Athens." And think about it, man. I wouldn't want to talk football if I would have been so dirty on the recruiting trail as Kirby Smart's been on the recruiting trail. I wouldn't want to talk football in the state that I've been so dirty in.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to expose myself to questions from Alabama media who could, ask me about the second half and ask me about, stories they've heard on the recruiting trail. I'm sure he doesn't want to open himself up to that. He would rather go home in front of all the pro-Georgia media and have them just play along and play nice. But, hey, Georgia media has been taking shots at Nick Saban for a while. There's a lot of good people over there, but there are some, like Michael Carville, who have taken a lot of unnecessary shots at Nick Saban and his recruiting practices because guess what? Kirby Smart's doing the exact same thing, and he's recruiting at a very high level, and he better recruit at a very high level because that's the only way you'll have a chance to beat Nick Saban. And I'll say this, right now, I think the only thing that's going to give any of college football any hopes and prayers, and if you're an Alabama fan, you certainly hope that this is not the case, but you better hope for more medical reports from Tua Tagovailoa, because if Tua Tagovailoa is healthy, you talked about elite quarterback play. I still say we've only just had a small taste and sample of it, but the days are coming. It's going to be very, very tough. There's going to be a lot of sleepless nights for a lot of coaching staffs in college football with all the young talent at Alabama. And one of the best things I saw from this weekend in Hawaii was that Tua had a lot of his teammates with him, Najee Harris and his mother, Josh Casher, Alex Leatherwood. All those guys were with him on that trip. And that says a lot for a guy like Josh Casher to be already so close to the Tagovailoa. He's a senior. He wasn't, Tua was recruited behind him, but that just shows to me the kind of magnetism Tua has as a teammate.
Drew, the LeBron James guy that loves LeBron James, that thinks that Michael Jordan is not up to the LeBron James side of things, would love to be able to ask you a question. He wants to know the latest basketball. I think he's going to get Cleveland.
First of
Boston,
all, don't
Boston.
ever call me a LeBron guy. I am a Kobe Bryant guy.
You are a LeBron
I'm a Kobe
James
Bryant,
guy.
California-born guy.
But you take up for LeBron James all the time.
I take up for LeBron James for the people who bash LeBron James.
I'm sorry.
Anyway.
I'm sorry. Marquise has a basketball question that he wants to work into the conversation.
So, Drew, we all know NBA draft lottery's over with.
I'm going to take a nap while you guys talk basketball.
NBA draft lottery's over with. Now, Colin Sexton at the NBA Combine. Where do you see Colin Sexton going in this projection? I see teams like Orlando popping up, Chicago Bulls, the Knicks. Also see 76ers, and also see this little battle and debate with who you draft over him or Trae Young. So let me ask you, where do you think Colin Sexton's going to fit in this NBA draft?
I know the workouts are still coming, and I think he interviewed with 3 teams, including the Magic and the Knicks at the Combine last week. I still think he won't go any lower than 9 to the Knicks. I think he's got the kind of magnetism in New York that would sell. They've got Porzingis, who's a guy they're building around. They got David Fizdale, the new head coach. But I hope he doesn't go to New York because they don't have the kind of infrastructure and ownership to win big. I mean, I think it would be an ideal situation if LeBron did stay in Cleveland for him to go to Cleveland at 8. Because, I mean, they need another Kyrie, and I think that Colin can absolutely be that kind of player in the NBA. The only problem is you got LeBron and his deal, and I think they're going to lose to Boston. So a lot of people think he's going to leave Cleveland and bolt via free agency. Could end up somewhere like Philadelphia. Sonny Vaccaro thinks he's going to end up with Oklahoma City, which would be just mind blowing. But I don't know. I think with Colin, I think he's going to go somewhere in the 7 to 10 range. I personally, I hope for him to have the most success as a player right away would be for LeBron to stay in Cleveland and then to take him 8, because I think, they really don't right now. It's LeBron and a bunch of dudes. I mean, they don't really have a Robin to his Batman, or, he's Superman. They don't have Batman. They don't have the dynamic duo. They need another guy. But for Colin to have a lot of success and to win, because I want him to go to a situation where they can have a good team. I think Orlando is a kind of situation where they always seem to be swimming upstream. They can't ever seem to get any traction. But if LeBron James stayed in Cleveland, I think him going to the Cavs at 8 would be great, because if LeBron leaves, then you got probably a 35 to 40 win team. Colin would be the best player on that team. You'd have some talent around him, but then it's going to be harder to get free agents to come to Cleveland. So to me, the best situation for Colin Sexton is for LeBron to stay where he's at. And trust me, I'm not a LeBron guy, but LeBron is Cleveland, Ohio, and then for them to draft Colin Sexton to be the new Kyrie Irving and to try to get them back at the top of the Eastern Conference. But I don't think it's going to happen, because the Celtics are young. They have the best coach in the NBA, in my opinion, in Brad Stevens. They'll have Gordon Hayward and Kyrie back, and then on top of that, they've got the Sacramento.
Drew, you got to hurry, man. My ratings,
which may be at the top of the lottery.
Thank you, man.
Boston's in a great position.
All right.
Hey,
all right.
don't cut them off.
No,
man.
no.
Look.
We got to go, man. We got to go, man.
Now we got to go?
Our ratings are falling through the man. They're like, I mean, I can see them drifting away right now as we're talking. NBA. I mean, what's the next thing we're going to do? Break down the tennis roster? I mean, I think somebody's already done that.
Hey, Drew, just book me on your show, man, and we'll talk basketball however you want, man. This guy over here.
I mean, you want to see if we can get the assistant tennis coach over here? I mean,
I could book that. I got the SID's email if you want.
Okay. I mean, go ahead. Might as well. Thanks, Drew. I hope you have a great one, man.
Oh, man, it's always great to be on in Tuscaloosa. Always great conversation with Ryan Fowler and Marquise Munson. Thanks, guys.